The movie begins with a scene where Emily, a social worker, is discussing a boy named Diego who often gets into fights at school with his parents. Later, a man named Wayne meets Emily and asks her, "How many active cases do you have related to family investigations?" She responds with 38. Wayne then hands Emily the file for the 39th case, which she reluctantly accepts. When Emily examines the file, she discovers it's about a 10-year-old girl named Lilith. After finishing her work for the day, Emily returns home and listens to recorded messages on her phone. One of the messages is from her boyfriend, Douglas, inviting her to meet up, and later, she goes to see him. After meeting Douglas, she returns home and starts reviewing Lilith's file again. Emily decides to investigate Lilith's family further, so she heads to their house. At Lilith's home, Emily talks with Lilith and her parents about the issues raised in the case, which include Lilith's poor performance at school and her frequent sleeping during class. During this conversation, Lilith's parents seem evasive, giving vague answers to Emily's questions. Later, Emily decides to have Lilith and her parents brought to her workplace for a more thorough examination. At her workplace, Emily interviews Lilith alone, during which Lilith insists that she has no trouble with her parents. Emily then meets Mike, a detective, and informs him about Lilith's situation. Although Mike initially hesitates to help, Emily's persistence convinces him to assist in the investigation. One day, as Lilith is about to board the bus to go home after school, Emily arrives and speaks with her, giving Lilith her home phone number. Later that night, while Emily is watching TV, she receives a call from Lilith, who tells her that her parents are planning to harm her. Alarmed, Emily decides to head to Lilith's house and asks Mike to meet her there as well. At Lilith's home, her parents are seen carrying Lilith, who is bound and gagged, and placing her in the oven to burn her. They briefly open the oven door to check on her and then put her back inside. Right at that moment, Emily and Mike arrive, and Emily knocks on the door, asking them to open up. Hearing Lilith's screams, Mike breaks down the door, and they rush inside. When they reach the oven, they see Lilith inside. Emily quickly pulls her out, and although Lilith's father tries to block them, Mike manages to subdue him, leading to the arrest of both parents. Emily then takes Lilith to a children's shelter where she will stay until they find a suitable family to care for her. Lilith expresses her desire to live with Emily as her child, but Emily gently declines. Later, back at home, Emily contemplates Lilith's request and ultimately decides to obtain permission from the agency to look after Lilith until a good family is found. The next day, Emily picks up Lilith from the shelter and takes her home, showing her around and introducing her to her new room. The following morning, Emily returns to Lilith's former home to gather some of her belongings. While collecting Lilith's things, Emily notices numerous locks installed on the door to her parents' bedroom, indicating they had locked themselves inside from within. Leaving the house with a sense of unease, Emily returns to find Douglas speaking with a group of children, including Diego and Lilith. She pulls Douglas aside and tells him what she saw at Lilith's home, leading them to suspect that Lilith's parents might have been suffering from mental illness. The next morning, after dropping Lilith off at school, Emily heads to work, where Wayne informs her that the previous night Diego murdered both of his parents. Emily goes to Diego's house, where Mike is already present, and he explains to Emily how Diego committed the murder. The sight of the crime scene deeply disturbs Emily, and she tells Mike she finds it hard to believe that a 10-year-old like Diego could have done this. Later, Emily visits Diego at the detention center and questions him about what happened. Diego admits to killing his parents. The following morning, while preparing breakfast, Emily goes to Lilith's room to talk to her and finds her looking at an old photo of Emily with her mother. Lilith asks Emily what happened to her mother, and Emily replies that she died in a car accident. One day, while Emily and Mike are discussing Diego's case over lunch, Mike mentions that a check of the phone records at Diego's house showed the last call came from Emily's number. Emily explains she had called Diego's house about a week ago, but hasn't called recently. Emily and Mike then ask Lilith if she made the call, but Lilith also denies it. Mike suggests to Emily that Lilith might be lying. The next day, Emily visits Diego again and asks him directly if Lilith called him. Suddenly, Diego becomes dazed and collapses, so they take him to the hospital. At the hospital, Diego tells Emily that Lilith did call him that night and that she spoke in a man's voice. Later at work, as Douglas and Lilith talk, Lilith asks Douglas, "What are you afraid of?" Douglas replies that he's afraid of bees. Lilith's response unsettles him, and he quickly tells Emily about the strange conversation before leaving. All these incidents make Emily increasingly uneasy about Lilith. And later that evening, even as they eat dinner together, Emily can't help but watch Lilith with concern. After, Emily prepares Lilith for bed, making sure everything is set, and then goes to bed herself. That evening, while Douglas is reading a book, he receives a phone call. He answers, but there's no response, so he hangs up and returns to his book. Soon after, he feels a pain in one ear and uses a cotton bud to clean it, only to find a bee emerging from his ear. As he removes that bee, several more bees crawl out from his ear, and he kills them. Afterward, he notices a swarm of bees on the back of his shirt. Slowly, he removes the shirt, but soon bees start emerging from his eyes, ears, and mouth. Struggling against the bees, Douglas eventually succumbs. Later, Emily, Lilith, and others attend Douglas's funeral. Convinced that Lilith had some involvement in Douglas's death, Emily shares her suspicions with Mike. Determined to uncover more, Emily visits the mental institution where Lilith's parents are and meets with Lilith's mother. But because Lilith's mother is in poor health, Emily ends up speaking with Lilith's father, who shares everything he knows about Lilith. After returning home, Emily hides all the phones in the house and keeps a knife nearby for her safety. When Lilith arrives home from school, she notices the phones are missing and asks Emily about them. Emily responds, saying they don't work. Later, Emily asks Nancy, a colleague, if they've found a suitable family for Lilith. Nancy informs her that they haven't found one yet. Emily takes Lilith to her office, and while they're in the elevator, Lilith asks a question that Emily ignores. Suddenly, the elevator shakes, as if to frighten Emily intentionally. Disturbed, Emily meets with Mike afterward and shares everything, but he refuses to believe her. That night, Emily installs several locks on her bedroom door to secure it from the inside. The next day, she goes to work, feeling distressed. While answering a phone call, she grows frustrated and angrily ends the call. Just then, Wayne approaches and suggests she head home, but she refuses. Right after, Wayne receives a call from Lilith, which he hands to Emily. Realizing it's Lilith on the line, she immediately disconnects the call and places the phone on the table. However, when she turns around, Wayne and the phone are gone, leaving no one in sight. Later, Emily returns home and heads straight to her room, locking the door, avoiding any interaction with Lilith. Soon after, Lilith starts banging on the door in a terrifying manner, demanding Emily to open it. When the banging stops, Emily turns to find a horrifying vision of Lilith's mother inside her room, leaving Emily terrified. She bolts out of the house, racing down the street, and hopping onto a nearby bus. Once she realizes Lilith's mother's vision is gone, she gets off the bus and returns to her car. But there, she finds Lilith waiting for her. Fearful of Lilith, Emily reluctantly agrees with whatever she says. The following day, on her way to work, Emily meets Nancy, who informs her that they have finally found a new family for Lilith. Emily, however, decides to visit Lilith's father for more clarity. When she meets him, he insists that the only way to deal with Lilith is to put her to rest permanently. In the next scene, we see Lilith's mother screaming as she's engulfed in flames. Later, as Lilith's father is having a meal, he notices the person across from him eating in a disturbingly similar manner to Lilith and speaking in her voice. Startled, he stabs the person with a fork and attempts to leave. As he rushes out, he slips, causing the fork he was holding to stab his own eye, leading to his death. Emily then goes to meet Mike, intending to inform him about everything that happened to Lilith's parents. To her surprise, Mike already knows about the incidents. He reveals that before Douglas's death, Lilith had called him, and he even has a recording of the conversation, which he lets Emily listen to. Shocked, Emily tells Mike that they must end Lilith's life, and he agrees with her. Emily then obtains sedatives to put Lilith to sleep, while Mike prepares to join her at her house. As Mike prepares to get into his car, a pack of dogs starts chasing him. He quickly jumps into the car, but the dog inside bites him on the neck. In a desperate move, he tries to shoot the dog with his gun, but the shot hits him instead, causing his instant death. Wayne calls Emily to inform her about Mike's death, which enrages her, and she vents her anger at Lilith. In response, Lilith speaks in a terrible voice, frightening Emily so much that she runs to her room, locks herself in, and bolts the door. However, Lilith forcefully breaks down the door and drags a terrified Emily, who was hiding under the bed, out of the room. Later, Emily decides to drug Lilith by putting sleeping pills in a cup of chamomile tea, which Lilith drinks completely. Once Lilith is asleep, Emily securely locks her in her bedroom from the outside, douses the house in gasoline, and sets it on fire. As she steps outside, she's horrified to see Lilith calmly walk out of the burning house, unharmed. Frightened, Emily gets into her car with Lilith and starts driving, pretending to head toward the police station. However, instead of taking the direct route, she speeds down a different road, aiming to scare Lilith. Emily drives at a dangerously high speed toward a nearby reservoir, ultimately steering the car into the water. As the car sinks deeper into the reservoir, Emily traps the twisted Lilith inside the car and tries to escape by opening the door. Just as she swims out, Lilith grabs her leg, but Emily manages to break free and swims to the surface. Emily reaches the surface, pulling herself out of the water with the help of a nearby ladder. Standing on the edge, she looks back at the reservoir, left wondering if Lilith is truly gone or not, leaving a lingering suspense as the movie concludes. Did you enjoy this movie? Stay tuned for more recaps and special features with Cinema Recap. Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more videos. See you soon. Goodbye.